No, I'll go as a ex MFH on that side to start with. Over the years, obviously, we give out tickets to the country. And at the last Kingston Blount meeting, our second as an amalgamated hunt meeting of the season, which was the beginning of May, we gave out 670 tickets to the country, to farmers, landowners, supporters. Now, how many would you think of those were used on the day? It was just under 200. We could, with the e-ticket machine, they came up how many we used. So it's quite interesting at times you give tickets away, and I, as a master, always said, you're only giving a piece of paper. You're getting a person along, you're getting them to buy a race card, have a bet, hopefully have a beer, hopefully in years to come. And I will say that we have a clerk of the course at the moment at Kingston Blount that turned up, and on that sort of reason of a free ticket is now clerk of the course. Probably the most expensive gift he ever had. But we do that. Now, to go back with my keeper's hat, I will say actually phoning up, because as I said earlier, we have a syndicate, and sometimes there's only one person comes, sometimes there's 10 or 12 people come. And I find most secretaries are very accommodating. So I think the way I will put it as a keeper is, if you ask very nicely, usually I find in this sport we're very accommodating.
Just hang on a moment. I would say, from the point of view of hunting as well as owners, you are far better to give out 20 tickets too many than one not enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, how long...
Excuse me, I don't know your name. Can you tell me?
Norman Stevens.
Norman Stevens.
How long is pointer-pointing going to be associated with hunting, particularly with a possible change of government shortly? Are there any contingency plans for the organisation?
We'll start with Alan on this one. I think that stopped working. It may have stopped working. Yeah, I think it probably has. Low battery. Try that one.
At the moment, I don't know if it's working or not. Well, I am. I can't get any closer. At the moment, it's very important that we stay together, and there is no plan at all from our side, the BHSA, in wanting to do anything but stay together with pointer-pointing. And I think as I widely go around the country, it doesn't matter if it's Wadebridge, Alnwick or Fakenham, that the more and more you go to these meetings, the more and more you see the support of the hunts doing all the work on the day, whether it be fence stewarding. I went to Chadsley Corbett on Monday, spoke to their master who was on the gate, well over 50 people there that day just helping for nothing. So from our side of it all, I could go on politically about it all, of what has happened recently in hunting, and obviously there have been one or two things that probably have not helped the publicity of us. But hey, every sport at the moment always seems to be, would you want to be a football referee going out through an airport? Because the other night they got attacked. Every sport, cycling, the tour leader for 8 years, winner, drugs. We all have our little hiccups, but at the moment I feel that hunting and pointer-pointing have never been closer together, and the passion from both sides, I hope we stay glued together.
You want to go?
Yeah, I totally support that, but it would be remiss if the PPA office wasn't doing some contingency planning. Clearly you all know that the recent act in going through in Scotland will have quite a serious effect on hunting. How that feeds out is not quite clear. And of course, up in Scotland, I have been working with the Northern area, who, as it happens, the chair and the area secretary live in Scotland, on the contingency plans and operations, how to put that into play. But there is absolutely no intention. If the question is, do we intend to divorce ourselves from bad publicity? No, that isn't on the agenda at all. But yes, there is some contingency planning going on because it would be irresponsible not to. It is worth noting, incidentally, that point-to-pointing, depending on how you calculate it, is a 20 to 50 million pound business, of which about 5 million is tied into the hunts. Just to give you an idea of where the figures are. If you went back to around 2000, it was more or less 50-50, that proportion of where the money lay. So it is quite interesting where it's gone.
Len, I think you were next. Just hang on.
Going back a bit to syndicates, and being a chap that run many a gate, syndicates frighten me, who is an actual member, who has actually got a ticket in their hand, because everybody wants to go in free. If you're going to have lots of syndicates, I think you're going to have some form of ID that you are a current member of a syndicate. Whether that horse is running on the day or not, the man on the gate can't sort it out.
Well, that will probably get sorted if we do get standardisation of meetings and policies on syndicates. Anybody else? Charlotte Fuller. Hang on.
Sorry, it's only because we've got YouTubers. Oh, hi, YouTubers. I was going to say, one of the things that slightly concerns me, I'm sure it will settle down and everything else. We've had any number of changes of race styles, regulations, conditions, and all of this and everything else. And we used to have a pretty firm idea by the time we got to the PPORA AGM of what was going to be in the waterworks for the coming season, which meant you could be going to the sales and knowing whether a horse you're looking at has actually even got a race it's going to be able to run in next season. I think running an uncertainty of how point-to-pointing looks for next season right up until effectively the start of the season when the planner comes out is not helpful. And I know that some of the changes have been absolutely great and brilliant and everything else, but this point now, from the end of the point-to-point season to the start of the next point-to-point season, is where we're all buying horses. And we need to know what we're buying horses for. We need a little bit more clarity earlier on. We just look a bit waffly and a little bit unsure of ourselves at times, and we need to be a really positive sport. We're equal to national hunt racing. Look, we've got 60 runners. It was 60 declared today here. There are 37 declared for tomorrow. Market Raisin had 39 yesterday. You know, we should be holding our heads up high as a sport that is absolutely level with, we might not have the bottom, we might not have the top of national hunt racing, but we are a parallel sport and should be looked at as such. Sorry, that's it from me.
Well, I can, or seem to think I can remember, Caroline Bailey coming out with a similar thing about 25 years ago when this meeting took place upstairs over there, and she'd just spent 2 days at Doncaster Sales.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Charlotte's general proposition. I think, for what it's worth, we haven't really publicised it, but there is a timeline which I introduced on arrival, whereby the way it works is, but we could bring it forward, but it depends. It was aimed at the Doncaster July sales to make sure you were clear for that. But basically, through the winter and from what you've got to have some part of the season to have a look at, see what's happened. All the different organisations have their meetings in February and come back with commentary, along with my travels around the houses, along with people calling me. And from that is I create the discussion paper, which the board clears in the first week of March and is put out to all and sundry. So everyone can come back with commentary. And the idea is there should be nothing outside that discussion paper which is going to come as news unless it's something to do with safety or integrity or BHA insists on. So in effect, there are only 4 different things that could come up, be changed for this year, 2 of which will have absolutely no effect on what horse you buy. Firstly, is to do with whether we remove the penalty in opens for whether you've won 2 hunter chases in an open or 3 hunter chases. It's never enacted. What we don't know, and therefore it's a lot of paperwork. The question is it not enacted because there is no need for it, or is it actually acting as a good deterrence to stop people doing it? We just don't know. So it's something that's open to question. The board will make a decision on. The second one is about the maiden conditions race, whether it should be 2 races generally or 2 point-to-points. And that again will go to the board. And yes, that does have an effect on sales. I accept that, Charlotte. But it's last year the board's decision was to leave as is. Interestingly, the commentary back on that is very even-handed. Probably leave as is, truth be known, from the people who talked to me about it. The third one is what we were discussing in terms of how to sort out the progressive racing and whether we should bring in a progressive race. Now, this is proving slightly more contentious, to be quite honest, and the discussion is ongoing on it, but we are going to have to come to a decision soon. Again, it doesn't really change the price of fish and the type of horse you buy because it's still progressive racing, if you see what I mean. And the fourth one, is an interesting. We've got a new sponsor for the flat races coming in, and they proposed that we should have 3-year-old flat races before the new year, which will get a lot of growling in this room, and I suspect will get turned down by the board. But there is an interesting aside, the reasoning behind that. But otherwise, Charlotte, there shouldn't be anything particular, and actually, Regulation 34, which is the eligibility thing, will more or less stay put. The only things we've done to Regulation 34 in the last couple of years is A, to close a couple of loopholes, which were odd, to put it mildly. People were bouncing horses backwards and forwards. And B, to make it simpler, so you can buy horses from Ireland from a licensed trainer and still run them in a point-to-point because they've only run in point-to-points. And in fact, you can buy them from anyone. As long as they've just run in point-to-points, you can run them in the same season. Which... As I say, the PPA board meeting's on the 5th of July, and the question mark you've raised here is whether in future years that board meeting should be earlier, which is an interesting aside, but normally we've tried to have it 4 weeks after the last meeting.
Because we used to get pretty much a good roundup at this meeting of what was in the pipeline. That used to meant that we all had a heads up, we could all discuss it, talk to any PPR area representatives that we wanted to, and we were... Hi, YouTubers. We could actually get this, much more under our belts before.
I think, Charlotte, all this meeting could have ever done is what the discussion paper already does for you in March, because the board meeting was always in July, so it can't have made decisions before then. So...
No, we had a pretty good idea when we came to this meeting of what was likely to be up, and we had a lot of discussion about those things. And the discussion paper, with the best will in the world, goes out to one person, and you get one person's response from it, each paper. Here, we're actually getting a chance to put our points of view across, and there's more general feeling. We all know whether people are slightly on our side or slightly against what we say. When you respond to a discussion paper, it's a very good test of the water and everything else, but it's not the same as coming to the AGM and discussing things.
Absolutely. So that's why you're here, to discuss those things in the discussion paper. I'm very happy that that's done. I mean, that makes lots of sense. But they are there and have been out.
The discussion paper wasn't sent out by the PPORA to let us have a look at or anything like that. There's been nothing from the... you sent it out to everyone, and that is absolutely great, but there was no invitation to come to this meeting and give our thoughts on them.
Well, that's why I was sitting here, really, but...
Probably 23 years ago, the PPRA actually ran the sport. The PPRA got the national sponsors. The PPRA liaised with the Jockey Club point-to-point executive. The PPORA had this function. The PPORA had the National Awards dinner. And then the point-to-point authority came along. The Point-to-Point Owners and Riders Association is now a members group, a lobby group. We're now no longer running the sport like we used to be. That's why Peter sends out the discussion paper, not us. We have input into the discussion paper because it's discussed at the board before it goes out. And things aren't quite as they used to be. So that's my take on your question.
Just going back, Charlotte, what horse, as long as it's qualified, i.e. hasn't won a graded race or been placed in class 1 or 2, can you not run from season to season at the sales? What horse is being exempt from what has been allowed to run the last 50 years? You know, I can't. Okay.
Whilst we're talking about entries, I'd like to ask Nick, do many people enter horses for races which they're not eligible?
Don't mention my name.
It's a minority. We probably get about 2 to 3 not qualifieds in each meeting, depending on the size of the number of entries. They tend to be in conditions races, where people haven't read the individual conditions underneath them. They just think it's a level 2, so it's the same as the level 2 that took place 2 weeks ago at another meeting. But there are sub conditions for each of these level condition races. They're basically break into 3. They can be divided between allowing no restrictions, so you can run horses with a penalty for a rules race. There can be restrictions that doesn't allow horses that have won under rules in the last couple of years. And there is also some that also preclude horses that have won an open as well as a rules race. So they're all slightly different. Also, there's a condition that means that you can only win so many condition races in one season. And people have fallen foul of that towards the end of this season. Obviously, I think it's 3, isn't it, Peter? I believe. And that was brought in to stop horses just running constantly, including running down from opens as well, back to conditions. I think what is a bit perplexing for us is that we've produced the planner. We've done a lot of work to get the planner out as quickly as possible. We put the races up to Christmas on the website before the book's published. But the sales of planners are not massive compared to the number of people within the sport, number of horses, for example. And we think that people are using the website, point-to-point.uk, and just looking at the title of the race and entering on that without reading the underlying conditions. Now, the conditions are also on the entry system if people want to look on the information. But I would encourage people to buy the planner in advance. It used to be littered with errors, I have to admit that. But myself and Peter have done a lot of work in the last 2 and 3 years in combination with all the fixture secretaries, and now have got a basic race planning system that's updated automatically, and the conditions all are populated back to the Weatherby's website database as soon as they're clear, and those are what would appear on the web and also in race cards. So there's a consistency, whereas before the planner was actually typeset by hand by a printing department who didn't understand point-to-pointing or whatever. So now it's much more consistent. So we would try and encourage people to buy the planner. And this year I think we'll be able to get it out much quicker because we've been working with our IT teams to make that a much more seamless performance. And also there were a few glitches last year as well as they are in any new system. But there still are a few not qualifieds, but you'd have to say that there's not qualifieds in a lot of rules races as well. And I know from experience that whatever you do, whatever you put out there in advance, any written things, you can try and put notices in go pointing or whatever at the beginning of the season. Trainers, whether they're point to points or under rules, will normally only remember a certain rule or be aware of it when they fall foul of it. And they'll have entered a horse and they realise, oh, that's not qualified, I didn't know that rule had changed. And then from then on, they know. But it's just that's the experience, basically.
Further questions? Gillian?
Yeah, I've got just a comment first and then a question. The comment is about what Ilona said about looking after owners and everything. In the Yorkshire area this year, we at our point at the Herworth, we put on a tent for...
Well, that one's died now as well.
First time we've done it, and we went round and take part in the tent, and it received a lot of positive feedback. I could see some pictures how they maybe can't afford to do loads, but we got lots of positive feedback from that because owners felt as though they were having a little bit more, and that was then taken up with our final season, and they'd been owners who'd been in the Herworth tent and thought, I want to do that at ours, and again it got lots of positive feedback, so we're hoping that that will progress next season. That was my comment. But the question I wanted to ask was, when people have put the hunter's certificates in and they put in their colours and everything, why are they always wrong in the race card? And also, is there any way that they can come through to the Point Racing Company and say, will you please change these colours and make sure it gets in the race card every time?
Right, so I discovered in the middle of this season that there was a glitch in some of the software that we had with colours. And it had been there for 10 years. And it was only working with Peter, who obviously gets the cards, marked up cards in, and any colour changes, that we were able to trace where this was. And it wasn't straightforward, it was quite a technical conversation. Because what we didn't understand was why we were getting errors on the course. And you can change your colours as you make the entry through the web. There's a drop-down list where you can pick, and obviously we've input those colours originally from the hunter certificate. It's one thing that we took off the hunter certificate actually, largely for space a few years ago, but now it's a PDF, you can have it back, and I think we'll probably put that back. That also leads into partnerships as well, because the way hunter certificates are registered is, unlike under rules, partnerships are not physically registered to the horse. They're registered to the main owner, and then there's a masking program that puts in the partnership name with the main owner in brackets after that. But the colours are actually registered to the person underneath. So somebody like Tom Ellis, for example, would probably have 20 colours registered in his name on our database, and you'd have to pick those depending on the name. One of the things I want to do in the summer is to look at whether we can put partnerships on in a better way on the database and attach the colours to those partnerships, so there won't be so many changed on the course. But it's all about data and getting that data correct. And that's a big task. It's a task that we always try and do in the summer to try and tidy things up. But in the last few weeks, we've had very few colour changes at all reported. So that loophole that we needed a bit of computer development to fix in probably about March has certainly stopped a lot of them. In essence, the problem was if you had, say, 4 sets of colours registered on the system in your name, and you picked number 2 when you made the entry on the website, for some reason it would publish number 4. And it was randomly picking them, which was very confusing to try and work out. But that's been fixed. And so one of the things that I've tried to bring in and make it a lot better is that if people tell us things that they find odd or errors on the cards, then we look at them and try and work out how we can stop that happening in future. So rest assured, for next season, it should be a lot tighter.
Peter, I'll let you say your bit on that.
Could I say, just to echo that, Nick and his team have done a phenomenal amount of work on this to try and sort it out. But one of the things that came up was really quite interesting, was an owner got fined for the wrong colours. So I was slightly, and then they got very cross and phoned up. They'd owned point-to-pointers for 18 years, never had different colours. So Nick then produced the 4 sets of colours against their name. Really odd. So I looked at them. The 4 sets of colours were all variations on the original colours, which clearly, whoever it was, whether it was the trainer themselves when they entered the horse, or whether it was someone at Weatherby's who typed it in wrongly, had over 18 years had ended up with 4 different sets of colours, although it was meant to be the same one, of which one of the sets, I have no idea how they came up with the description, which of course was the one that turned up and got them the fine. Let's pass over the fine side of it. But, which was dropped instantly. What I'm getting at is there is a problem here where human error is coming in terms of what people, if people keep on writing different sets of colours in, although they're describing the same set of colours, clearly the system just thinks, oh, different set of colours. So there is that side to it as well. The partnership one is an interesting one. Nick, I and Lynn Williams have a meeting in the next couple of weeks. As just explained before, the responsibility for the horse in going wrong will move from the owner to the trainer this next season. That doesn't mean to say the owner will still be able to do all that he wants, as they want in terms of filling in if they want to fill in the hunt cert and so on and so forth, they still can, and they can continue to enter the horse and so on. So it's not going to stop the owner doing their bit if they want to. However, in the past, there had to be a single owner because that owner was responsible if the horse went wrong. That clearly, during COVID, got to a slightly odd situation where a horse was pulled up for its behaviour by the stewards. Well, what happened referenced the horse. And the owner was promptly fined by the stewards when they were sitting in the different zone. In other words, they couldn't speak to the stewards, they couldn't have any effect on that horse, but they got fined for the privilege. That clearly made a mockery, and with more and more horses in training where the owners live hundreds of miles away, that's going wrong. I don't think any trainer would object to this. It just will provide a bit more clarity to a system that is frankly at the moment outdated. So we're just working through the practicalities of that, but one of the answers to that might be, as Nick says, in terms of the partnership.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad alterations have been made. We took 4 of our horses to Heathrow. We could only run 3, and then we had to change the jockey because there was so much confusion in the entry system there. Hopefully it's a lot better than now.
Well, from what Nick and Peter say, it probably is. We have got to the appointed hour, but since we were late starting, let's see if we've got one more question. Stephanie.
Hi. Just going back to trainers and keepers, is there any thought on having dual-named keepers, trainers?
There's certainly thought. Again, we're back to responsibility. And that we're looking at it is a simple answer, Stephanie. And I know, interestingly, it's come up on both sides of the Irish Sea recently. The issue, I know there has been a wish on a few people's part for dual, particularly in couples, for it to show for various reasons. We're looking at the regulatory angles to that. And indeed, as to who will then be responsible, because someone has to be responsible at the end of the day.
Since that was quite brief, Mr. Tall, would you like to have a go?
Mr. Chairman, panel and members, various roles, I've seen the country pursuit that it was, so closely connected to hunting, slowly be changed into a business. Horses the like of late night past, homebred and trained, staying in the same stable, and regularly campaigning, being the essence of the sport we love. Many meetings and courses are struggling to survive with soaring costs and regulations, and ever-decreasing help and manpower that came from the hunting side. Some are blessed with the golden dates and some with fine weather, but the less fortunate ones can't carry on without some financial help. One possible way forward could be to accrue a fund to help the poorer venues by asking the sellers of young horses who are sold away from the sport after 1 or 2 outings to donate a percentage of the sales price to a central fund or to the course that they won at. The argument being that without the opportunity to run and show their form, they wouldn't attract the same attention at the sales. As I said earlier, point-to-pointing has become a business, and the business has to reinvest some proceeds back into the venues, without which there would be no such business.
We did have a similar question from you on that subject last year, and Nolan read it out for us, and you and I have had discussions on that matter at point to points. My personal view on it, as Graham knows, I've already told him, is that when you see a horse sold for £100,000, you do have to remember that it probably cost 25,000. You've trained it for 6 months, which has probably cost you another 5 or 6. You've paid the sales company a huge amount of money to enter it. You've been away for several days looking after it, showing it off to people. You've paid them a huge amount of commission. And if you're doing that with multiple horses, by the time you've lost 1 or 2, or 1 or 2 that don't turn out to be as good as you think they are, that £100,000 very soon disappears.
I have a comment, but could Tom be up?
Yes, Tom is probably the best person to answer this question.
Question for us there, but I mean, there's a huge amount of money gets invested in this by ourselves and anybody else who's adopted the same model. I mean, if the fixtures would like to share the losses we incur too, it would be greatly received on our part, and then we could probably talk. But in reality, that's just not going to happen. And just touching on the numbers side of it, very clearly, if this started to happen, we would walk away straight away. So your 380 young horses that you have certificates registered for, a big chunk of those, the money that gets reinvested back in the sport through them, will be gone as well.
Yeah, my personal view is that the sport needs every horse that it can get, whether it's a 1 run, 2, 3 runs, 4 runs, whatever.
Sorry, can I just come in slightly on? Obviously, I endorse both Tom and Mark's. Funnily enough, it is something I looked at when I first came into the sport, to this job, rather than the sport, because I was intrigued by it, and I was well known as part of the Larkhill team who was slightly fed up with one particular trainer. But that's long gone. This is frankly the last of the golden geese, if you like, for pointing, is the growth of the young horse, and we want to move that on without affecting the rest of it. BHA, when I mentioned it to them, killed themselves laughing and said no. So that's in regulatory terms, we couldn't do it. There's an interesting aside here, though, Graham, that you do bring up, which is a far more complex issue, is to whether, at the moment, grants and things like that are done on a weekend basis rather than on a regional basis as well, taking into account certain factors. In fact, for what it's worth, the spring fixtures are probably making more money than they ever have. I've gone back 10 years and 20 years to look at the records, and yes, they're paying out more money, but yes, they're also taking more money. Well done them. A lot of these fixtures are really well organised now and have really begun to develop. The gates are up, as you will have seen. The more problematic ones are the ones where we're talking about the true racing, if you like, normally in the winter, where the going is generally on the softer side of good, and we'll get the bigger, if you like, the racing aficionado, the proper racing, and those are quite difficult to balance, and they're, you know, hence why they get bigger grants to keep them going. But the for what it's worth, the 4 and 5 year olds is not only would be a bad idea, but it's also not practical to do. For example, most of the biggest prices are privately sold. Don't go to auctions. You wouldn't know what they were sold for.
Alan, let's have your thoughts.
Slightly echoing and repeating what's been said, but the MFHA, as it was BHSA now, we meet 3 times a year, and we have a very good committee throughout the whole country, and this question's never been brought to the committee that we feel that we should be getting money back from the sales of these horses. If anything, as has already been said, we're happy that they are putting straight away a hunter certificate registration, an entry fee registration into that meeting, and also, as we've seen, there's been quite a few high profile horses that have won, that have advertised our sport. So from the hunting side of it, there has never been a gripe. We're pleased to see these young horses go and be sold as pointers to feel that people then have it put to them and advertised to them. We are a sport, and we will get young horses through our academy to go on. So from hunting side, I have never had that put upon that we should be having a cut of the cake that is being sold.
And isn't most of the time that, I mean, I don't know, but a lot of the time it's being reinvested in other young horses for next season?
In many cases, yes.
If one was to be sold
Yes.
for 100 grand, I don't know if Pond does, but maybe the owners that own that would then possibly invest in 2 or 3 with that money. So you're always having more horses coming back into the store.
Yes, I agree.
I just got one request from all of you that purchase horses, that you encourage the sale houses to look at sponsorship at fixtures, etc. That might be a way that they could support the courses and the fixtures, look at a series, look at young horse series, but look at sponsorship in some way, because that might be a way that would benefit the sport without having to take percentages off horses sold.
So those tats already do.
Tats do a bit, but they could do more. Some of them could do more.
Right, we're now 1:10. I do believe that there's been some champagne on ice down the road for quite some time. I'd like to bring the meeting to a close now. I don't see you've got your hand up there, Len, but go on then.
Wessex and Devon and Cornwall is not happy bringing the season to a close without the cross. I've had several owners, trainers, who asking the question, why are we better have our sport late season? I think from the owners and riders' point of view, those 2 meetings will be very beneficial to the Young Horse Awards. And I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot to coincide, bring the season to a close here. I think it's wrong.
Right.
And I'll fight the course for those people down there.
Okay. The Young Horse Awards have been presented on this day at Stratford forevermore. Quite where Devon and Cornwall has got the idea from that the PPORA are the ones who are responsible for wanting everything to end at Stratford, I have absolutely no idea. No. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last year that we have this awards dinner at Stratford. Both the National Awards dinner has seen a decline in people attending over recent years. This dinner has seen a decline in people attending over recent years, and there are current thoughts that maybe we amalgamate the 2 dues and have a worthwhile do in June or July. It's not set in stone at the moment, but it's an idea. That's the only reason I can think the PPORA are being blamed for wanting the season to finish earlier so that the awards can be presented at Stratford. The reality is you need 2 weeks between the end of the season and your awards dinner. So it wouldn't be looking at just 2 meetings. So we can put that one to bed straight away. Okay. If nobody else wants to come back on that reply, I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions, and thanks to everyone else on the panel. See you all down for a glass of bubbles.